So welcome to the ACAP MBA mini class. In this session, we're going to be talking about why you would want to study an MBA, and I'll be able to answer any questions about our MBA program. But also we're going to focus on almost as if you were doing this as a class if you're an MBA student. So it's going to be like a mini experience of being an MBA student. And we're going to be focusing on identifying and developing critical leadership skills. So I'm hoping that we all, me included, actually get some really good tips and reminders about the kinds of things that we need to do as leaders in our business environments to really step up and meet the challenges of today and tomorrow. Before we start, in the spirit of reconciliation, I would like to acknowledge that my puppy dog got a squeaky toy. I'm sorry about that. I'll start again. In the spirit of reconciliation, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. That we pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. ACAP supports the Uluru Statement from the Heart and its compelling call for voice, treaty and truth-telling. We are committed to advancing reconciliation and ensuring that everyone in our Australian community has access to information about the significance of constitutional recognition for First Peoples and what a voice to Parliament is and why a referendum is needed to change the Australian Constitution. So in this session, I'm going to, as I said, basically run it like a shortened version of a class. But normally in our MBA classes, they are live and online. And what we mean by live is that each of the students is on camera and ready to come off mute and to chat and ask questions and interact with each other. Because we're doing this a little more formally, we'll be using the chat function, but mostly I just wanted to flag at the outset that we really do emphasize that our online training is live and interactive, because it can get quite isolating as an online student to just be, listening to something, maybe a lecture or a recording, and then having to go and plow through all the material on your own. And we've decided to do away with that model of teaching and make sure that all of our sessions are much more interactive. And I'll be doing that a little bit in today's session as well. So for those of you who are listening live, feel free to ask any questions via that chat function and we will respond to those as we go along. We'll also have an opportunity for some more detailed Q&A at the end. So in today's focus of today's class is looking at identifying and developing critical leadership skills. I noticed that when I first started looking into, what is leadership and how do we develop, that a lot of the people that I was working with didn't really have a framework for what are the key skills that leaders need to have. How do we measure them? How do we develop them? What happens when they go wrong and people's leadership skills are causing problems in the workplace? So I'll bring some of that context in today's discussion, and you get a taste of the kinds of things that we'll be covering normally in an MBA leadership class where we do a deeper dive into this topic. So just very briefly, a little bit about me. I am an experienced executive coach and working in organisations, coaching senior leaders for many, many years, but particularly also that my PhD and MBA research and study and post academic studies has been really focusing on what do leaders need to do to be able to manage the impact of, say, digital transformation, artificial intelligence technology, globalization, financial challenges, completely different competitive environments and so on. And there's a real challenge, I think, for leaders to step up to that kind of environment and that, I'm really interested in how MBA programs and also the coaching programs, which ACAP also offers, can really be set up to support people on that journey. Just a little bit about ACAP. So we're 40 years old this year. We've been delivering specialist courses since 1983. We have campuses all around Australia, but as you know, this MBA program is fully online. And as a result of it being online, we have some really great online resources where you can go through our online systems and engage with our material, as well as engage, as I mentioned, live with the educators in our weekly classes. So we offer courses in lots of different areas, from coaching and counselling, criminology, psychology, social work, law, management, accounting, IT, and quite a number of others. And we've got over 20,000 graduates that have gone through our programs. You can see there also, there's my email address. So if you wanted to talk a little bit more about our MBA program, feel free to email me directly, and I'm happy to set up a Zoom or a phone chat to talk you through so that you know as much as you need to. And we answer all your questions about the MBA program to help you make the right decision around that for your career. But before we go any further, I'd really just love to hear a little bit about you. Those of you who are live online, don't be shy. I'd love for you to share in the chat box just your first name and why you're interested in an MBA. What motivated you to come on to this call tonight, for those of you who are live, and the advantage in hearing a little bit about other people on the call is that you start to get a sense of what are the kinds of students that will be in your cohort. So if you could do that via the chat, that would be awesome. Just to jump into that chat box to let us know what is your name and why you're interested in MBA, and I'll read those out, and we'll have a bit more of a sense of who's on the call, and it will be the start of our kind of having a more interactive conversation in tonight's session. So I'll just wait a moment for people to jump into that chat box and respond. So while we're waiting for people to jump in, I'll just give you a bit more of a background as to the kinds of students that we have doing our courses, mostly because of the entry criteria. As you know, of course, it's postgraduate study. And one of the entry criteria is that you have at least, say, 5 years leadership or management experience. And so most of the students in the cohort will be middle to senior managers who have been working in lots of different areas, from working in government, non-profit, academic organisations, and also in the corporate sector, and that they're using the MBA as a way to really understand business and learn how to manage business really effectively, and that what they bring to the conversation is their own expertise. So you learn a lot in any MBA program, but we certainly emphasise it in our program. You learn a lot from the interactions from other people in the course, and the way that we set up the environment, particularly for online learning, is that you get the chance to engage with other students and really build your network, and to work alongside your peers and colleagues as you're studying. So thank you. Tanya's jumped in, looking at potential areas to study in future career choices. So thank you, Tanya. Looks like a lot of the rest of you are maybe a little shy. Feel free to jump in. I'd love to hear your name and your interest in the MBA to jump in on that chat box, but I will move on because it looks like, we've got a few others coming in now. So Shirley, welcome. You're a Year 12 student doing business studies, and you want to be a social worker in the future. So thank you for your interest in our program. And Sharon, you're in Brisbane, interested in finding what to learn in retirement. Wonderful. Sharon, I imagine that you've got some long-standing work experience that you would bring to that role, and bring to your studies, and that's a really interesting piece, is that we often get people in this course that are looking at maybe some kind of a career change, and the MBA can certainly set you up for becoming much more of an expert in business and management, and can really help people to take promotions or even work in more of a consulting environment using those business skills. And thanks for that comment, Sharon. You've made me smile. So Nina, you're in Dubai, and you're building on leadership skills to be able to bring the best out of your team and business objectives. Thank you. Welcome. C, that you mentioned that you want to gain a higher level role in business. Fantastic. We often get people that are doing an MBA for that sense of promotion, and I will talk about it in a little bit, but as part of our program, we do offer you that career guidance and support so that you have the opportunity to really work through with a career expert. Where are you at in your career and what might be next for you, and how we can help to set you up for success for that. All right, so I will move on and I'll keep an eye on that chat as we go along, but thanks for those of you who jumped in to share a little bit about you. So I wanted to just now dive into our topic that we're going to talk about tonight, how to develop as a leader. And it's the sort of thing that we often take for granted. It's like parenting. You know, everyone thinks that you have a child and you know how to parent until it actually happens. It often happens in a similar way with leadership, where someone will get promoted all of a sudden to a role where they've got quite a lot of direct reports, a lot of responsibility, and they might be, say, a technical expert in something like finance or marketing or IT, but they don't have the people skills to really be able to navigate that. So we do build into this MBA program that focus on developing you as a leader. And as we know, my first point here, that businesses are changing at a really fast rate, and therefore that leaders need to have both those technical problem-solving skills, but also the people skills, and that developing those people skills requires quite a lot of self-awareness and insight, and that's the kind of thing that often we can take for granted of, like, yeah, I have self-awareness. But we find that it's really only when we start to really drill down on our behavior in the workplace and also our thinking, how we're thinking through making decisions and solving problems, that we start to uncover some gaps. And as part of this program, you'll get the opportunity to do some self-assessments on where are you at around your own level of leadership development, and then what might be the gap and how you improve. Of course, developing as a leader requires that openness to feedback. And as part of that, we can use what we call a 360 kind of model, where you go actually to your colleagues in a workplace and ask them to fill in a survey on how they experience you as a leader. And that gives you much more objective, or you could say maybe even subjective data on how you're going as a leader. And, you know, how do you incorporate that feedback into your own leadership and growth can be really challenging. And so as part of that is really looking at having that mindset of being curious as to, you know, where am I at in my own way of thinking and behaving, and how might I continue to grow and improve. But part of that also, which I've sort of touched on, is to have that really good understanding of what are the key attributes of successful leaders. You know, what are and I'll go into some of those in the next couple of slides. What does a successful leader actually need to be good at? It's something that we don't really talk about much in the general public. And so it's also about understanding what are your strengths in those leadership areas and what might be your own blind spots. So just something to think about, I guess, is, you know, some reflection as to where you think you are at as a leader and what would be your own strengths and blind spots in that kind of environment. Okay, so as I mentioned, really want to focus on what we think might be the key leadership attributes and what the research shows are the most important leadership attributes. And the way to sort of think about it, often I sort of think about it in terms of a sort of one part is the real people side of things, and the other is much more task-based. And the people side of things is about really being able to relate to and communicate and collaborate and develop with and work with others. The ability to get things done and achieve results, implement strategy, and inspire and influence others is kind of much more of the task focus. But as part of that ability to have the people skills and also the technical skills, we need to have a really good understanding of how it all kind of fits together. And that's my third point, about understanding the system that influences the organization. You could say maybe the politics, you know, what's happening in this particular market that your organization's working in, understanding supply chains, competition, and so on. And in what you'll find in doing an MBA is you get a really good understanding of the financial aspect of business, marketing. You learn about project management. You'll learn about competitive strategy. So you start to understand about the machinations, the gears that make a business much more effective and competitive. And then how can you intervene in those kinds of situations? Of course, we've got my fourth point here, the ability to act with integrity and have a sense of ethics, relating authentically and building trust. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, that ability to foster that self-awareness and maintain composure under stress. So some of these have come from a particular leadership psychometric framework. So you can actually go online. I can send through that link for those of you who are interested, and you can do like a survey that'll give you feedback as to how you're going with each of these pieces of the leadership puzzle. And then once you realize that you might be we often get people that are very strong in the people side of things, but maybe not as good in the productivity and output or even strategic side of things. Or it could be the opposite, that someone's, as I mentioned, very technically strong, but just doesn't have the people skills required to inspire, to influence, to be a visionary leader, to motivate others and so on. And so there's quite a complex set of skills that I think are needed to be effective. I'm just going to pause here and see if anyone had any comments in the chat. So feel free as I'm going through if you've got any questions. And I can see here we've also got Helen who's introduced herself. So you've got you've got a master's degree in leadership management and education, and you're interested in doing an MBA, sounds like, to further your career. So Sophie, thanks for that message. I will jump in and find that link and hopefully be able to send it out either before we finish today, or otherwise I'll get our team to email it out to you all so you can do that online free assessment of your own key leadership attributes. So, of course, as I touched on, a really important part of developing ourselves as a leader is to understand our blind spots. And ultimately, we only ever really identify our blind spots through other people spotting them and pointing them out to us. Hopefully, it doesn't happen in a kind of performance management situation, or, in the middle of a conflict where someone tells you that you're really not very pleasant. But also, the research shows that each of us have different kinds of blind spots. And another way of thinking about this is, what do we do when we're under pressure or when we're stressed? The research shows that we each have a tendency to either get more controlling, to be more kind of autocratic and perfectionistic. And what that means in summary is we kind of become a bit more confrontational. We move against others, where we're sort of move into kind of a fighting mode. Or we might move away from others. We kind of step back and we might become more judgmental or critical. We might end up kind of disengaging from a project and just kind of standing back and creating a bit more of an environment where we're negative, but we don't actually speak up. Or the other point is that we might actually move towards others and be more kind of compliant and a yes person, being more passive and pleasing. So there's a really interesting research that shows, and this comes from the Leadership Circle. You can see that website there, leadershipcircle.com, for more. And Sophie, it was on that site that they have the free psychometric test. So hopefully you can find that link on that page. I forgot that I had this in the slide. So leadershipcircle.com, and you can go in and do your own free self-assessment on their website, and it will give you some feedback as to what I had on the previous slide, which was, I can hopefully go backwards, this ability to relate to others, the ability to get things done, acting ethically and so on. And then to understand your own blind spots around moving against others or moving away or moving towards. So developing as a leader means knowing your own reactive tendencies and actually developing strategies to reduce their negative impact. And one of the ways that we do that in this MBA program is you learn the basics of how you would apply coaching to yourself. So how you'd coach yourself, but also how you would coach others and use coaching strategies to lead and develop others, rather than, using more directiveness or, telling people what to do. And so we find that when people start to develop their own capacity and what we call becoming a leader using coaching skills or a leader as a coach, that these three tendencies of being more controlling, more judging, or more compliant tend to diminish because we end up working with other people rather than kind of working in opposition. So I'll give you an example. When, say you've got a staff member who's not performing very well, rather than kind of telling them to do more or get things done more quickly or whatever we tend to do is be more directive. If we had a coaching mindset on, we'd be asking questions rather than kind of telling them what to do. And the kinds of questions we would ask is, can you tell me a little bit about your workload? And can you tell me a little bit about how you're going with whatever it is, your output of X number of widgets? What's in the way of you completing more of that or completing that to a greater level of detail? What support might you need to meet that goal? How can you clear other things off your plate, for example, so that you've got more capacity to be able to do this work that you're committed to? What support could you get from the rest of the team, or how could you delegate other work, and so on? And so by turning a performance issue into much more of a coaching conversation, we find that the leaders have much more influence over other people. And you can certainly use that in the with direct reports, like in that example. But you can also use it when you're managing up. So rather than saying, this is what I think we should do, it might be, okay, what's the strategic direction here? Okay, here's a suggestion as to, one of the things that I think we need to take into consideration. Who do I need to speak to, or who is it that's responsible for this? Let's have a meeting offline and discuss this in more detail. So it ends up being much more of a kind of collaborative way of working as a leader when you use those kind of coaching conversations. So we unpack that in a lot more detail in the leadership unit, which is a core unit in our program. I'm just going to pause there and see if there's any other comments or questions in the chat. Okay, I'll keep going. So as I've mentioned, this idea of developing yourself as a coach really can help to inspire other people, because what someone with a coaching mindset has is this view that my employee, my direct report, for example, they know already the answers, or they have some sense of the answers. And my role is to help them to tap into that themselves. So what you end up doing by using coaching questions and asking the person, what are the blocks? How can you improve? What support do you need? What's going on for you around this? Tell me more. What are you committed to doing from now on? That becomes like a superpower where you're actually getting, although you're asking questions, you're getting your staff member to do the heavy lifting in terms of them committing to what it is that you're wanting. And so, as mentioned, this is a real mindset shift where the leader focuses on providing more guidance and support rather than having to do all the answers. And as I mentioned, it's really a shift from telling to asking. The other thing that using coaching skills can really do is help for someone to shift the way they're looking at a problem, because we do get people, we all have moments where, particularly under stress, we kind of get stuck into looking at things from just one perspective, like it's all too much, it's all too hard, it's not fair, and so on. And what a coaching conversation can do is help people move from maybe a blame mindset or a victim mindset or a kind of a lacking kind of mindset to more of a solution mindset. Okay, what are your options here? What's worked before? How can you leverage the support and the things all around you? And so these collaborative conversations are really designed to help empower other people and also help for them to step up and develop their own leadership attributes. So we find that by using a coaching style, that our teams start to then apply those questions to themselves rather than having to come to you as the manager to have all the answers. So just wanted to check and see if anyone had any thoughts about that, and if you've tried that kind of coaching style for yourself in leadership roles, or have you had someone try it on you, and has it worked or has it not worked? I'd be really interested in the comments in the chat. Feel free to jump in there. So this all kind of links to this idea that, and this comes from Bob Anderson, who's developed the leadership circle. I gave you that link on the previous page. This idea that leadership is really about an inner game rather than an outer game. It's much less about what we do, although of course that is important, and what we produce, of course that is important, but it's more about how we think, how we take into account all the different pieces of data that's available to us. How do we find out more to understand the system or to understand the issue in more detail? The research shows that effective leaders are the ones that understand that mindset, that way of thinking, that way of processing information is a really key part of overall performance in the end. And so most senior leaders these days will receive some kind of executive or leadership coaching to really help to build that self-awareness and to develop those frameworks and resources to navigate the environments that they're in. And what coaching can do is it can help for you to take a step back when you're in the middle of, some kind of major project, for example, to take a step back and not think about necessarily what you're doing, but how you're doing it, how you're getting things done, and are there better and more kind of sophisticated or more nuanced ways to get things done or to operate. We also find that high potential leaders are those that have identified and been able to manage their own blind spots and those inner blocks holding them back. So they become much less reactive, much less reliant on those three tendencies to move towards, against, or away, and much more responsive to situations. And we've all probably seen and admired people who can keep their cool under pressure, maybe even sometimes wondered how on earth do they do it, and that really that level of self-awareness so that people are much less reactive is a key part of that. And so in developing that inner game of leadership, we've realised that an important part of the journey for any MBA student is to go through that process of, inner development. And so as part of the MBA program that we offer here at ACAP, we have what's called a high impact leadership program, where every single student will receive some coaching, and part of that's in a group setting where you actually learn or you receive coaching yourself on your own leadership challenge, whatever it might be, but you also learn how to coach others in a very safe group environment. So you get to actually practice these skills as you go along. And the feedback that we've got is that, that's a really key part of an MBA program. It's not just about learning the sort of technical skills and getting through all the assignments. It's also developing yourself personally. And it sort of moves into this, comes from a McKinsey article, this idea of having inner agility. We often talk about agile as a way of managing projects, but inner agility is this ability to kind of pivot, to not get stuck in a rut, to continually look at different ways of thinking and challenging or responding to challenging environments. And so they have these really great, in this article, if you're interested in looking it up, these really great 5 points that I thought I wanted to just sort of make sure that we spent a few minutes on. This idea of pausing to move fast. We've all had times where you go through a day and you haven't had a chance to stop and think. But the research shows that often when we're in that kind of mindset, we're quite reactive. We're often kind of going and relying on old habits. Whereas if we take that chance to kind of step back, take stock, then we become a lot more kind of strategic in the way we respond to something. The other thing which is, becoming more and more evident as technology accelerates is that leaders no longer need to have all the answers. And so it's completely okay to be ignorant, you could say, or maybe a softer word is to not be across everything in detail, and to really leverage the expertise of other people in our team, or even, external consultants where appropriate. And that the leader's role is to facilitate those conversations rather than to now no longer be the subject matter expert. And so the role is not about the level of knowledge expertise. The role becomes much more about how do you find that expertise and how do you bring out that expertise from other people, and make sure that you've got that information contributing to whatever project you're working on. The third point, which really links in with that kind of coaching mindset, is to keep reframing questions. So rather than, how do I get more of a market share, or how do I sell more widgets, or how do I get more, service delivery targets, or whatever it might be. Thinking more, taking that step back, and being much more strategic as to how do I look at my competitive market differently and find maybe new and original ways of growing the business that other people haven't thought of. How do I implement, small wins or small changes to maybe have big wins? It might even be around, customer service delivery, for example, or how might I use the emerging technology in a way that can really deliver a much more sophisticated end result to whomever. And so this is a really key challenge that we're finding that business leaders are facing is, with so much information and emerging technology, how do we start? Where do you even get a chat GPT kind of, AI interface, and how do you plug it into a current environment? And of course, there's lots of people around that are consulting on that. But as part of what we talk about in this program is how do business leaders use that emerging digital technology and that mindset of embracing technology to really look at where that can be implemented in certain parts of the business to really make, a huge difference. The other point that they've got here is this idea of setting a direction, not a destination. So as we all know, just like a sailing boat going over, a harbour, that often will move from point and then have to pivot and move to somewhere else and point again. And if we clear, what is our true north of where we're headed, then we don't get stuck if we need to make a detour, or if we realize that the destination that we'd considered actually ended up being maybe even obsolete. So that idea of having more of a kind of destination, direction is more around the value proposition rather than a particular target. So I don't think these are absolutes, but they're certainly things to consider as part of our overall strategy. And to test solutions and yourself, what are the blind spots? What have I missed here? What assumptions might I be making, and so on. So really encourage you, if you're up for it, to check out that article, which is online, and that it talks about these kinds of skills in a lot more detail. And, as I mentioned, these are the kinds of skills that I think leaders are really having to develop as they step up to the challenges of today and tomorrow. So I just wanted to sort of pause, and like we would do in any class, we do really want to make sure that the information we give you is practical and that you can apply it straight away. So can I encourage you, if you've got the bandwidth at this time of night, for those of you who are live on the call, just, and you can keep this to yourself, of course, or if you wanted to, you can throw some points in the chat. But think of a current work challenge that you've yet to resolve. And here's, about, 7 questions that might help for you to think through this differently. So, of course, we're thinking about what might be the underlying cause of this issue. And as part of that, it might be, who do I need to talk to understand what are the underlying causes of the issue? Often we think we know the problem and then we go and try and fix it, and realizing that actually we hadn't got our analysis right and we're fixing the wrong problem. There's all sorts of case studies about that. Some of those that we'll be covering in the classes as well, where an organization's tried to fix something, maybe even thrown, in some cases it's been like hundreds of millions of dollars at something, and it's been a completely different issue that was the underlying issue, the completely different cause that was the underlying issue. So in thinking about the particular work challenge, also, if you're applying this to something in your life right now, what might be the opportunities here? Often we only think about the challenges, but what could be the opportunities? What are you learning? What are you being exposed to? What kind of challenges is this kind of this environment bringing out of you? How are you developing in this environment? Of course, what I touched in previous slides, what assumptions might I be making here? If there's only one thing you get out of tonight's little class a mini class on advancing your own leadership skills, and even I think as a parent and as a friend and as a partner, to really ask that question quite often can make a huge difference. What assumptions might I be making here that can really help us to cultivate that curious mindset to look at things differently? Kind of linked into that is what might I be missing, and sort of feeding into that one is who else might view this in another way, or even how else might I view this in another way? And then kind of that always comes back to sort of circling back around to the original point. What are we really trying to solve for? what is the actual underlying issue that we're wanting to address here. So we might be, talking about a customer complaint, but really what we're trying to solve for is to get a much better reputation as being a star provider of excellent service in the marketplace. So, okay, it might not be just responding to complaints. It might be looking at how do we actually look at improving the delivery that we offer to our clients directly. So hopefully some helpful questions for you to kind of reflect on in relation to your own leadership skill. And if you want, of course, certainly take a screenshot of these questions. And they're the sorts of things that I think are really helpful whenever you're stuck with a certain challenge, to kind of come back to these sorts of things that can help for you to keep pivoting, having that inner agility as you look through challenges. Okay, so that's all I wanted to cover off in terms of that idea of developing our leadership capabilities. Just going to give you a really quick overview for those of you who are interested in our MBA program. So as I mentioned, we really want to help for you to develop and accelerate your skills as a leader. And we're looking at both the practical and the personal skills. So the practical are what I would call the business skills, the strategy, the entrepreneurship, the governance process, understanding the legal and financial requirements of running a business, understanding how to influence and work with board members, how to progress your career and work in much more senior roles. But as part of that, how do you develop your own leadership capabilities for each of those capabilities? So not just getting better at marketing, getting better as a manager, working with, say, a marketing team and bringing the best out of that team to support the product that you're trying to develop, for example. So we really focus on making sure that our course is very much applied. So in every class, and all the assessment tasks are really designed to be the kinds of things that you would do in a business environment. So you doing things like a presentation to board members, or you're looking at crunching the numbers on or analysing the numbers on a financial spreadsheet to make some decisions about whether or not you're going to go and buy, a company, for example, or invest some shares into a company, for example. And then build throughout the curriculum lots and lots and lots of case studies where we're constantly looking at what's going on in the news on a regular basis, and how do we learn from what's happening in other companies in real time. As mentioned, we have this high impact leadership program, which is a really important part of our overall offering, where you receive some personalized leadership coaching, as well as career and industry specific mentoring as you focus on developing both the hard and soft skills required. So that industry specific mentoring is another key part. As you move towards the end of your master's degree, you do work on a capstone project of your choosing, where you're developing a solution for an organization that it could be hypothetical, or it could be an actual solution like an app or some kind of business plan that solves a particular problem. And what we do is we get, say you're working in health, that you'll be working with a mentor that has expertise in health, who will help you as you develop that particular capstone program. So you're really getting that hands-on project-based expertise that you develop as you go. And as mentioned, you both receive coaching and you learn how to apply coaching techniques so that you can become a leader as a coach yourself. So that's all I wanted to cover in regards to the MBA program. I'm happy to go through in a bit more detail, our entry criteria, a little bit more about our timetable and our offering if people wanted to. We didn't have all of that in tonight's class because we wanted to focus this on a bit more of a mini class. But if anyone had any questions about the course, happy for you to put that in the chat. And also we have our course advisors both live in the chat, and I'll give you their details in a minute, that can answer any questions directly. But we'd really love for you, if you've got a few minutes, just while you're live online, one of my colleagues will put this link into the chat box. If you can just jump onto SurveyMonkey and give us some, answer 7 easy questions to give us some feedback on this session, you have the possibility of winning a $50 voucher to thank you for your contribution. So you can see Ravina has given you that link in the chat just now. But if you wanted to know more, you can certainly contact me directly, but also you can call us on 1800 039 139, and you can see our email addresses connect@acap.edu.au. So feel free to touch base with Ravina in the chat or via email. So if anyone had any questions that you wanted to ask in the chat, feel free to. Otherwise, I will pause the recording. For those of you who are live, I'm happy to answer any questions directly if you wanted to come off mute and ask any questions directly.